Guys, how are you doing today? I hope you are doing amazing and fantastic and wonderful. I am all cozy in my new sweater from my grandmother, my nanny. Thank you so much. And I've got Plot Twist Wicks Cozy Mystery Candle burning. It smells amazing. It's fig and sea salt, and it's got glitter, which is wonderful. And I am all ready to talk about and read chapter 2 of Apple Cider Slaying by Julie and Lindsay. This is the January Cozy Escape book club pick. Make sure that you go over to Lisa's channel and watch her read the first chapter. Pretty sure she's gonna do some baking. I am not. I am just recently getting over a bad cold, so if I sound stuffy or there's some edits because I've sneezed or blown my nose or something, then that's why. But yeah, I'm super excited about this book. It's a cider shop mystery series and it's going to be absolutely wonderful. I just know it. I mean, it's a Kensington cozy, and Kensington cozies are probably the best type of cozies if you ask me. I was sent this by Kensington and I am just super stoked to read it. So let's get into this. Chapter 2. Miss Montgomery, a slow southern drawl. Oh guys, my southern drawl is gonna come out. Yes! Poured under the closed door with such assured authority I nearly wept. This is Sheriff Colton Wise. I'm gonna need you to open up. I nodded, though no one could see me. I wasn't sure how much time had passed since I'd first seen Mrs. Cooper in the cider press, but forever seemed roughly accurate. I slammed the door against the cluster of tourists headed my way when I saw the body and locked myself inside. I shut the door in Mr. Sherman's face. The knot in my stomach tightened. When Grampy installed the new lock to protect his equipment 5 years ago, I thought he was bonkers. Who would want to steal apple sorting or press machinery and paraphernalia? He'd said that I would understand someday, but I never dreamed I'd need the lock to protect tourists from seeing Nadine Cooper's dead body. I flipped the deadbolt and moved out of the way. The door opened slowly, and a lean man with broad shoulders and kind eyes slipped inside. He wore jeans and boots with his sheriff's jacket. His big hat was in his hands and pressed to his chest. Winona May Montgomery? I nodded, my dry, swollen tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. Have you touched anything in here? He asked, throwing a pointed look at Mrs. Cooper. I shook my head and tried uselessly to swallow the constricting lump in my throat. I'd seen the new sheriff a time or two since his election last fall, but we'd never officially met. Have you been right here since you locked the door? Yes, I managed to say. The sheriff offered a small, compassionate smile. Do you know this woman? He asked, glancing again at Mrs. Cooper. Yes, I willed myself to elaborate, but my thoughts moved too quickly for my sticky mouth, and I wasn't convinced I wouldn't throw up if I parted my lips longer than necessary. A rap came at the door, and Sheriff Wise pulled it open, held it wide with his boot. The blast of sunlight brought tears to my eyes. There, he tipped his head toward the cider press, and a pair of EMTs charged in that direction with a yellow backboard and matching medical kits. Behind them, an elderly man shuffled along. The back of his black jacket had 7 white block letters. Coroner. A woman with a toolbox fell into step at his side. Winnie! Granny's frantic voice echoed through the open door, laced with fear and worry. I hated the sound of it. I never wanted her to be alone or scared. I'm okay, I yelled back. I'm coming. The sheriff swung his face in my direction. Just a minute now. Can you tell me what happened in here? No, I opened the door and Mrs. Cooper was there. I said, finally finding my voice. I was showing Mr. Sherman the property, and when I saw the door was closed, I opened it. My heart pinched as a new thought emerged. Mr. Sherman will never give a small business loan to a failing orchard with a dead woman in the apple press. I hated myself immediately for the selfish thought. Against my will, more awful notions followed. Could the press even be cleaned after this? No way, right? We'd have to buy a new one, and the press costs a fortune. We couldn't afford it. Maybe I could offset the cost of a new press by selling this one on eBay? I pressed the palms to the side of my head and hoped lightning didn't strike me on the spot. Miss Montgomery, the sheriff said, sharp blue eyes scanning the beads of sweat gathered on my forehead. Would you like to step outside? I flicked my gaze to the corner, poking and prodding Mrs. Cooper. The woman with the toolbox scraped a stick under Mrs. Cooper's fingernails and my stomach flopped. Yes. Sheriff Wise held the door while I scurried into the sunlight, sucking in deep lungfuls of fresh air after far too many shallow breaths inside the crowded barn. A deputy stood between Granny and an ambulance. A pair of cruisers were angled several yards away as a makeshift barrier. Baby! Granny wrapped me in her arms. I'm so sorry you had to see something like that. Mr. Sherman told me what happened and I headed right over here. But when I saw the guests outside the locked door, I knew I had to gather everyone back at the fruit stand before the authorities arrived. Deep lines creased in her brow. By the time I did all that and the deputies questioned me as well, I couldn't get away until now. She wiped her shirt sleeve over her puffy eyes. I just can't believe any of this. Her bottom lip quivered as she pressed my cheeks between her soft palms. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. My stomach rolled as I stepped out of her embrace. The heels of my uncomfortable shoes sunk into the earth. I hadn't even thought about the visitors. I whispered, none of those companies will ever book with us again, and it's my fault that so many were here. I wanted the orchard to be busy when Mr. Sherman came so I could get my loan. I rolled my eyes skyward and wrapped myself in a hug. He left before I had the chance to finish my pitch and show him the mail pouch barn. Now he was never going to agree to that loan, and this day officially couldn't get any worse. Miss Montgomery, Sheriff Wise began again. Do you have any idea who might have wanted to hurt Nadine Cooper? I turned my eyes to him and then they flickered traitorously towards Granny. He raised his brows and looked at her too. Miss Smith? Or Smythe? I think it might be Smythe. I cringed. He was sure to find out about Granny and Mrs. Cooper's relationship. If we didn't tell him, would it make us look guilty? What if Mrs. Cooper had run into Granny on her way home and the two had fought? I hadn't spoken to Granny since Mrs. Cooper left. I had no idea what had happened next, and the orchard was crowded today. Someone could have heard them argue before Mrs. Cooper was killed. Mrs. Cooper came looking for Granny today, but I hadn't had the chance to tell her until now. What did she want? He asked. I'm not sure. She wanted to talk to Granny as soon as she could. The sheriff crossed his arms and focused on Granny. Any idea what this is about, Mrs. Smythe? None, she said. I haven't seen Nadine in 2 days. He nodded, maintaining eye contact and tipping his head over one shoulder. Were the two of you close? He asked. I shut my eyes so I couldn't give away anything else. The world seemed to spin faster. We weren't friends, if that's what you mean, Granny said. I see, he said. How would you describe your relationship with the victim? I suppose I'd say we're neighbors and we tend to bump heads more than shake hands. Did you like Nadine Cooper, Mrs. Smythe? My eyes popped open. Maybe I was wrong. The day could definitely get more worse. Of course, Granny blurted. I liked her just fine. Really, because a lot of folks have the idea that you two were enemies. I turned to face the sheriff directly. Why would you say that? I asked. My Granny likes everyone. He hiked a brow and then let his features settle into a frown. The way I hear it, your Granny's relationship with Nadine Cooper was as tumultuous as the New River Rapids. Granny sighed. You're not wrong. I've known Nadine for 43 years, and we've never had a conversation that didn't end in someone's ruffled feathers. Nadine and I weren't friends, but we're part of this community, and that made us family. Does that make sense? No. The sheriff widened his stance and continued to look at Granny and me over with keen, judging eyes. I think Nadine Cooper was practically your sworn enemy, so I can't understand why she was over here looking for you today. I don't know, Granny repeated. They both looked at me. I lifted my shoulders and palms. I'd already told them everything I knew. She was mad again, and she wanted to talk to you ASAP, and she didn't say why. Granny frowned. She rarely does. That's how she keeps the upper hand, by making me walk into her little ambushes. Granny's ruddy cheeks went pale, and her lips formed into a tiny O, and she slapped the palm over her mouth. Gracious! I didn't mean to be so disrespectful. I just can't believe this is happening. I slipped an arm around her waist and tugged her against my side. The press building's door opened once more and the coroner stepped into the frame. Sheriff, Sheriff Wise stared at us another long beat before turning and walking away. I released a shuddered breath and leaned my head on Granny's shoulder, letting my tears flow free. Who would do something like this? Granny rubbed my back with big, comforting circles. The sheriff will figure it out, don't worry. I wiped my eyes to stop the tears as she pressed a kiss to my head. A heavy shadow stretched over us a moment longer, blocking the sun and sending a chill across my skin. Granny's hand stilled on my back. I turned to find Sheriff Wise evaluating us once more. He frowned down his nose from the 8 or so inches he had on my shrimpy 5'4" frame. His big hat was stuffed back on his head, and the shadow it threw across his face was utterly intimidating. Mrs. Smythe, where were you at noon today? Bringing the tractor back from the tour, Granny said. Alone? Of course. I dropped a group off at the pavilion to sample our wares, and then I took the tractor over to the house for a quick sandwich and bathroom break. After that, I headed back up to front to collect the next bunch of riders. So no one can vouch for where you were, what you were doing, or who you were with between noon and 1 o'clock this afternoon. Is that correct? Granny puckered her lips and brow. Well, I suppose someone must have seen me driving back to the fruit stand. I was on a big green tractor. I gripped Granny's hand in mine and squeezed. I think you should stop talking, I said softly. I think Sheriff Wise is implying something he shouldn't be. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. The last call Mrs. Cooper received on her cell phone was from you, Mrs. Smythe. Granny's eyes widened. That's right, I said. She said, I forgot. There was a message on the machine from Nadine when I stopped home for lunch, so I returned her call and she didn't answer. I folded my arms, glared back at him, suddenly more angry than frightened. What exactly are you suggesting, Sheriff? Just that the body of your granny's longtime enemy was found in the building belonging to your granny after receiving a call from your granny. At the time, no one can confirm her whereabouts or activities, he said. It's interesting, yeah? Granny's knees buckled slightly, and I held her tighter. No, I said, it's not interesting at all. You're just restating the fact that someone left a dead body on our property while Granny was busy working elsewhere. You can twist and manipulate that statement any way you like, but it won't budge the fact that Granny was nowhere near this building today until 30 minutes ago. Now, are you arresting her, or can we go? I asked. The sheriff's frown deepened. You're free to go, but I'd consider getting a lawyer. He handed us each a business card with his contact information on it. I'll be in touch. He tipped his hat and headed back to the crime scene. I would have kicked stones behind him, but my heels were buried 3 inches into the ground. So I hope that made you want to read it more and are super excited. Sorry if my my accent kept going in and out, but that happens because I'm not feeling the best. But yeah. Oh, I also wanted to see, look at these earrings that Lily Loving gave me. And they're freaking adorable. Thank you so much. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. So that's the end of this chapter of Courtagonist. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, happy reading. Bye.